The night was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of night where even the smallest sound seems louder than usual. He had been sitting on the porch, sipping tea, watching the stars twinkle like tiny diamonds in the vast sky. Life was simple and slow in his little town, and nights like this were peaceful, the kind of peace that made you feel like nothing in the world could go wrong. But then something unusual happened. A sudden streak of light tore across the darkness above. It moved faster than any airplane, faster than any satellite, leaving a shimmering trail behind it. It wasn't a plane. He knew that. It wasn't a shooting star either. It was bigger, brighter, and it had a strange golden glow that seemed alive, as if it were almost aware of where it was going. Without thinking, he dropped his cup and ran toward the open field behind his house. The grass brushed against his legs. As he ran, the cool night air rushing into his lungs. He didn't know exactly what he expected to find a meteorite. Something rare, maybe, something that could make him famous. Or maybe it was just curiosity, that deep pull inside him that made ordinary people do extraordinary things. When he reached the spot where he thought it had landed, the ground looked normal at first, just dirt and grass and a few rocks. But then, something unusual caught his eye. A faint glow was coming from a small mound of dirt, like the earth itself was humming with a secret. He carefully approached it, crouching down to get a closer look. At first, he thought it was a stone, maybe a meteorite, just like he had hoped. But as he brushed away the dirt with his hands, he realized it wasn't a stone at all. It was smooth, almost glassy, shaped like an egg, and it glowed softly from within. The patterns on its surface were strange, swirling like smoke trapped under crystal, but they didn't look like anything he had ever seen on Earth. It wasn't just glowing. It almost seemed alive, pulsing gently, like it had a heartbeat. His heart began to race. He knew he should call someone, maybe the authorities, but something stopped him. It was like the object was asking him to keep it a secret, or maybe it sensed that he wasn't a threat. Against his better judgment, he reached out and touched it. The surface was surprisingly warm, and when his fingers made contact, he felt a faint vibration, almost like the pod was responding to him. He sat back, on his heels, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He told himself it must be a trick of the light, maybe some strange rock formation. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. He had discovered something that was not of this world, something completely extraordinary. For hours, he just watched it. He didn't want to touch it again, didn't want to do anything that might harm it. The glow began to change colors slowly, moving from a soft blue to a gentle purple. It seemed almost alive, almost breathing. He realized this wasn't just a rock, not a meteorite, and certainly not ordinary. There was something inside. Curiosity got the better of him. He decided to move it somewhere safer, somewhere he could watch it without anyone noticing. He wrapped his arms around the strange pod and carried it back to his garage. It was heavy but manageable, and every step he took, he felt a soft humming vibrating through his arms, almost like a quiet song meant just for him. Once inside, he placed it on the workbench and stepped back. The glow from the pod filled the small room with colors that shifted like water. He wanted to call someone, but he hesitated. Who would believe him? Who could even understand what he had found? The idea of keeping it a secret seemed not only possible, but necessary. As he watched, he noticed small changes. Tiny cracks began forming along the surface of the pod, lines that looked like delicate veins. A faint mist escaped from these cracks, curling in the air like smoke from a candle. The glow inside grew brighter, pulsing with a rhythm that made him feel dizzy and amazed at the same time. The night grew deeper, and the garage became a quiet sanctuary for the strange object. He could barely sleep, standing there watching it, fascinated by every little change. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. He noticed that the pod wasn't just glowing randomly. The colors seemed to respond to his presence, brightening, slightly when he approached, dimming when he stepped away. Then something happened that made him freeze. A small piece of the shell shifted, cracking open slowly like a flower opening for the first time. Through the crack, he caught a glimpse of something that made him catch his breath. There was a figure inside, curled up tightly, pale and delicate, with a soft glow that made it look almost ethereal. He stumbled back, heart racing, unsure what to do. It was humanoid, in a way, but not human. The shape was perfect, symmetrical, and incredibly beautiful. He felt a strange connection to it, a pull he couldn't explain. The pod's soft hum grew louder, as if encouraging him to stay, to watch, and to understand. Hours passed, and the cracks widened slowly. The figure inside stirred, moving with the grace of someone awakening from a deep sleep. He wanted to reach out, but hesitated. What if it was dangerous? What if he did something wrong? But his curiosity, and something deeper compassion, perhaps pushed him forward. Finally, the pod began to open fully, splitting down the middle like a seed cracking open. A soft blue mist poured out, filling the garage with a cool, otherworldly scent. The figure stretched gently, uncoiling from its curled position. Its movements were smooth, effortless, and somehow mesmerizing. When it finally emerged, he could see her clearly. The alien girl was breathtakingly beautiful, with delicate features, luminous skin, and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. She looked fragile but alive, alert, and curious about the world around her. She opened her eyes and looked directly at him, and for a moment he felt as if she could see straight into his soul. He wanted to speak, to say something reassuring, but no words came. Instead, he simply held out his hand, and she reached for it slowly, as if understanding him without needing language. She didn't show fear, only trust. And in that instant, he realized something extraordinary. This wasn't just a discovery. This was a meeting, a connection that was meant to happen, a moment that would change his life forever. The night outside faded into a quiet morning, but inside the garage, time seemed to have stopped. He and the alien girl sat there, studying each other, trying to understand this impossible situation. He wondered how she had arrived here, what kind of life she had before the pod, and what dangers might have followed her to Earth. For now, all he knew was that he had to protect her. He didn't know how, didn't know from what, but the sense of responsibility weighed heavily on him. She had come into his life in the most unexpected way, and he understood that things would never be the same again. As he looked at her, awake, now and aware of the world around her, he felt a strange sense of awe and humility. He was no longer just a man sitting on his porch, watching the stars. He was someone chosen, somehow, to be the first human to meet something completely alien. And deep down, he knew that this was only the beginning of a story far bigger than himself. The pod, now open and empty, still glowed faintly on the table. It seemed to pulse with satisfaction, as if acknowledging that its mission bringing her here was complete. Outside, the world remained unaware, the sun slowly rising over fields that had seen nothing unusual. But inside the garage, a quiet miracle had happened. A human had found something impossible, and that something had looked back at him with trust, curiosity, and life. He knew sleep wouldn't come, not tonight. He wanted to watch over her, to make sure she was safe. Every sound in the garage, every flicker of light from the pod, every breath she took, seemed precious. The ordinary night had transformed into something extraordinary, a night that would be remembered for the rest of his life, even if no one else ever knew it happened. And in that quiet, glowing space, he made a silent promise to her. No matter what came, no matter what challenges awaited, he would protect her, Because some moments, some meetings, are so rare and so powerful that they change who you are forever. And this was one of them. The morning light crept softly through the cracks of the garage, casting long shadows on the walls. He hadn't slept at all. He kept glancing at her, the alien girl, as she slowly sat up on the soft blanket he had wrapped around her the night before. She blinked a few times, her large, shining eyes adjusting to the light, and looked around curiously. Every movement she made was careful and delicate, as if she was learning what it meant to be in this world for the first time. He didn't know how to speak to her. She didn't speak his language, and even the simplest words seemed meaningless. But when she looked at him, she didn't seem scared. There was a quiet intelligence in her gaze, a spark that told him she understood more than he could imagine. He decided to stay calm and gentle, moving slowly so he wouldn't frighten her. For a long time, they just sat in silence. He watched her examine the garage, turning her head, reaching out to touch objects, and pulling her hand back quickly when she wasn't sure. Her skin glowed faintly in the morning light, soft and almost translucent like the inside of a pearl. He couldn't take his eyes off her. She was extraordinary, beautiful in a way that seemed impossible. Yet she also seemed fragile. He tried speaking to her softly, repeating simple words. "Hello, it's okay. You're safe." She didn't understand the words, but she watched his lips and gestures closely. After a while, she reached out, touching his hand lightly with a small, cold finger. There was no fear, only curiosity. That single touch made him realize she was trying to communicate in her own way. He looked around for something to help her feel comfortable. He found a small blanket, a cup of water, and a soft towel, placing them near her. She hesitated at first, but eventually touched each item, her tiny hands brushing over the textures as if learning what they were. The water cup fascinated her the most. She picked it up carefully, tilted it, and let a few drops fall onto her hand, watching them sparkle in the morning sun. It was a small moment, but it made him smile. He realized that even though she was alien, she was learning, and learning quickly. Hours passed. She began exploring the garage more boldly, crawling on the floor, stretching her limbs, and even balancing herself on the edge of the workbench for a moment before stepping down. Every movement was cautious, but filled with wonder. He watched her, feeling a mixture of amazement and responsibility. She was completely alone in this world, and it was his job to make sure she stayed safe. As the day went on, he noticed something extraordinary. She seemed to respond to emotions. When he moved slowly and spoke softly, she relaxed. When he laughed quietly at something small like a bird landing outside, the corner of her mouth curled slightly, and her eyes brightened. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but he felt a connection forming. This wasn't just about keeping her alive. It was about understanding her. And somehow, she was beginning to understand him. By afternoon, he decided she needed food, but he had no idea what she ate or if human food would even work for her. He offered small pieces of fruit, soft bread, and water. She sniffed each item carefully, sometimes ignoring them, other times touching them lightly. Finally, she tasted a piece of apple. Her reaction was instantaneous. She blinked, looked at him, and made a soft, musical sound, unlike any human word. He laughed, feeling relief and joy. It was the first real interaction between them, a tiny breakthrough that gave him hope. He spent hours observing her. Every movement, every sound seemed meaningful. She was intelligent, aware, and alive in ways he had never imagined. He noticed the way she tilted her head, the way her fingers flexed, the subtle glow that pulsed from her skin like a heartbeat. It was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. And he began to feel something he hadn't expected. He was becoming attached. As evening approached, He realized he needed to protect her from more than just the unknown. The world outside was dangerous. People might come, see something strange, and react in fear. He decided to make the garage more secure. He covered the windows with old curtains, moved boxes to create a barrier, and set up small lights that wouldn't attract attention, but would help him see in the dark dock by night. She was more relaxed, curling up on the blanket again. He stayed nearby, watching her sleep for long stretches. He noticed her breathing patterns, the tiny rise and fall of her chest, and the subtle glow that never disappeared completely. She seemed peaceful, safe, and for the first time, a part of his life, even though she was not from his world. A strange thought crossed his mind. How had she ended up here? How far had she traveled, and what had she left behind? She was clearly not from Earth, and yet here she was, in his garage, entirely vulnerable. He realized that she had somehow trusted him, or at least accepted that he wasn't a threat. That trust was something sacred, something he couldn't betray. During the night, she moved slightly in her sleep, making soft sounds that almost resembled words. He leaned closer, curious, and noticed that she reacted to his presence, even while unconscious. Her hand reached out and lightly touched his arm. It was small, tender, and completely unafraid. His heart ached with the awareness that he had never met anyone like this, never experienced a connection so pure and unspoken. He began to talk to her regularly, not expecting her to understand the words, but knowing that the sound of his voice might comfort her. "You're safe here," he said softly. "I won't let anything happen to you." She responded with small movements, tilts of her head, and the occasional soft sound. It was communication in its earliest form, a language that existed without words. Days passed. He noticed that she was learning quickly. She began mimicking small gestures, like pointing to objects, touching them, and then looking at him as if to ask a question. He started teaching her simple signs, showing her how to indicate hunger, thirst, or discomfort. She picked up almost immediately, repeating the gestures with astonishing accuracy. Each time she learned something new, he felt a sense of pride, not in himself, but in her resilience and intelligence. Evenings became the most special time. He would tell her stories, simple tales about his life, about the stars, about the town. She listened, tilting her head, sometimes reaching out to touch his face, as if to understand the human expressions. He laughed quietly at her curiosity, amazed at how much she wanted to know, how eager she was to understand this world that was completely alien to her. One night, something incredible happened. She made a sound, soft and musical, that he could almost recognize as a word. He froze, staring at her in disbelief. She repeated it, this time looking directly at him. It wasn't perfect, but it was the first step toward communication, a sign that she was not only observing, but also trying to reach out. He realized that their connection was growing, not just through gestures, but through a shared understanding that transcended language. He began to think about the future. She would need more than just his garage, more than his protection. She was not human, and the world outside might be dangerous, even if it seemed calm. He worried about her, about the life she had lost, about what had forced her into that strange pod and sent her to Earth. But he also felt hope, because she had survived, and now she had him got as he watched her drift off to sleep that night, glowing. Softly under the dim garage lights, he understood something vital. This was no ordinary encounter. This was the start of a journey, one that neither of them could have predicted. And even though he didn't know what lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. He would not let her face it alone. The alien girl was no longer just a mystery, a strange object that fell from the sky. She was alive, aware, and beginning to understand him, and in return, he was beginning to understand her, in ways that went far beyond words. The bond forming between them was quiet but unbreakable, a thread of trust, curiosity, and shared wonder that would guide them through the unknown days. Ahead, the pod, now empty and quiet, sat on the workbench, a reminder of the impossible journey she had taken to reach him. And as the night settled around them, he felt the weight of responsibility, but also the thrill of discovery. He had found something extraordinary, and it was no longer just an alien in a pod. It was a being alive and learning, and now, in a way he couldn't fully describe, part of his life. For the first time, he felt a true connection to something, completely alien, and the thought filled him with a sense of awe and purpose. No matter what challenges came next, he would face them with her. She had trusted him, and that trust was a gift more precious than anything he had ever known. Days turned into a week, and the alien girl was starting to feel more comfortable in the garage. She no longer stayed curled up on the blanket all the time. Instead, she explored the space with a mix of curiosity and careful caution. Her movements were fluid, graceful, almost like she was learning to move in this world all over again. He watched her closely, feeling a mix of fascination and concern. Knowing that every small gesture mattered, she had started to mimic some of his actions. When he picked up a cup of water, she would hold her hand the same way, tilting it slightly, even if she didn't understand drinking. When he gestured to sit on the floor, she would mirror him, crouching down and examining the surface beneath. Her hands. It was amazing to see her learning so quickly, learning from observation alone. He realized she didn't just watch. She absorbed everything, like a sponge soaking up knowledge, patterns, and behavior. Communication was still difficult. She didn't speak words he could understand, but her eyes and body language were incredibly expressive. A tilt of her head, a raise of her eyebrows, or the curve of her lips told him more than words ever could. She seemed to understand emotions too. When he smiled, she would smile back, faintly at first, then with more confidence. When he showed concern, she would respond with calmness, touching him lightly, as if to say, "I understand." He decided it was time to start teaching her more structured ways of communication. He drew simple symbols on a piece of paper: water, food, sleep, safe, danger, and pointed to them while saying the words softly. At first, she just stared at the symbols, curious but unsure. But after repeating it several times, she began to touch the symbols when she needed something. The first time she pointed to the symbol for water, he felt a rush of pride and relief. It was the first small victory in teaching her to interact with him in meaningful ways. As they spent more time together, he noticed other abilities she had, subtle things that were extraordinary. She could see in the dark better than any human, almost as if her eyes adjusted to light differently. She could sense when he was near, even when he moved quietly behind her, turning her head toward him without a sound. And there were moments when her skin would glow faintly, almost like a signal, especially when she was curious or excited. He didn't know what it meant, but it fascinated him endlessly. One afternoon, she began to explore the items on his workbench more confidently. Tools, jars, and old objects were no longer strange. They were new things to investigate. She picked up a small wrench, turning it in her hands, observing its shape and weight. Then she put it down gently and reached for a jar of screws, inspecting each one. He realized she wasn't just curious. She was analyzing, learning about the materials, understanding how they worked. She was intelligent, far beyond what he had imagined for someone or something so young in this world. Her curiosity extended to him as well. She would watch him perform simple tasks, fixing things, moving objects, cooking small meals, and then try to imitate him. The first time she tried to pour water into a cup, it spilled all over the floor. But she didn't give up. She tried again and again, each time more careful, until she managed it perfectly. He clapped softly, and for the first time, she laughed a soft, musical sound that filled the garage and made him feel warmth he hadn't felt in years. At night, she started to sleep more comfortably. No longer curled up in a tight ball, she would stretch out on the blanket, glowing softly in the dim light. He would watch her, noticing the tiny rise and fall of her chest, the twitch of her fingers, the flicker of light from her skin as she dreamed. He felt a protective urge stronger than ever. She was not just a discovery or a mystery now. She was someone he cared about deeply. One evening, while he was preparing a simple meal, she began to touch his face, tracing lines along his hands and arms. He realized she was trying to understand him, to learn who he was, not just how to survive. Her fingers lingered over his eyes and lips, and when she looked into his eyes, it felt as though she was searching for the essence of what made him human. He felt a mixture of awe and humility. This being from another world was so aware, so observant, so eager to learn. Over time, she began making sounds that were closer to words. They were not human words, but patterns, rhythms, and tones that seemed deliberate. He started responding to her sounds, repeating them, trying to establish a rhythm, a shared language of sorts. She would watch him carefully, and then repeat what she heard, slowly matching her voice to his. It was a delicate dance, a careful building of trust and understanding. Each new sound she made was a triumph, a step closer to real communication. He also noticed that she was highly intuitive. She seemed to sense moods, changes in the environment, even things he hadn't consciously noticed. When a bird landed near the garage, she turned immediately, eyes wide, almost alert, as if she could feel the presence of life in ways humans could not. When a distant car approached, she would tense slightly, her small hand reaching for his arm. It became clear that her senses were sharper, more acute than his, and he realized that she might be more capable of understanding danger than he was. Despite her intelligence and awareness, there were still moments of innocence, moments that reminded him she was still learning about everything. She would tilt her head at reflections in mirrors, laugh when shadows moved strangely on the wall, and marvel at ordinary things he had taken for granted. The way she explored the world was like watching a child experience everything for the first time, but with a depth and wisdom beyond any human child. One day, he decided to take her outside, just for a short time. He was careful, worried about what might happen, but he knew she needed to experience the world beyond the garage. They walked slowly into the yard, her small hand resting lightly in his. She looked around in awe. The sky seemed brighter, the grass greener, the air fuller. She bent down, touching the grass, feeling the texture, and then looked at him with a sound of delight. He laughed quietly, feeling a deep happiness at seeing her experience simple joys. The outside world brought more challenges. She was cautious, hesitant to step on uneven ground, sometimes stumbling on stones or roots. But she always recovered quickly, looking at him for reassurance, and then moving forward with curiosity renewed. He realized that she was learning not just about objects or language, but about movement, balance, and safety. Her mind was constantly analyzing, absorbing, and adapting to a new environment that was completely foreign to her. As the days passed, he felt a deeper connection forming between them. It wasn't just about teaching her or keeping her safe. It was about sharing experiences, understanding emotions, and forming a bond that transcended words. She was learning from him, yes, but he was learning from her as well. Her perspective on the world, her awareness, her curiosity, it all changed how he saw ordinary things, making life feel brighter, more alive. One night, as she lay resting, after a long day of exploring, she reached out and touched his hand again. This time, The gesture felt deliberate, intentional, and filled with meaning. He understood that she was acknowledging him, not just as a caretaker, but as someone important in her life. A rush of emotion swept through him, a mixture of responsibility, affection, and awe. He knew that this was no longer just a story of discovery. This was a story of connection, of two beings from different worlds, learning to trust and understand each other. He realized that she was more than an alien being in a pod. She was a person with thoughts, feelings, and a mind capable of incredible understanding. Every day she learned something new, and every day he grew more aware of the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. She had survived something incredible to reach him, and now she was beginning a new journey, one that he would share with her, no matter what came next. The pod, once a symbol of mystery and wonder, now lay quietly on the workbench, empty but still glowing faintly. It was a reminder of where she had come from, of the unknown journey that had brought her here, and of the extraordinary being who now sat in his garage, learning, exploring, and becoming part of his life. And as he watched her close her eyes for sleep that night, he felt a quiet determination settle in his chest. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he would protect her. He would help her learn, understand, and survive in this world. She had trusted him, and that trust was sacred. From this day forward, he knew that their lives were intertwined in ways neither of them could have predicted, but he also knew that together they could face whatever the future held. After several weeks of quiet learning and careful observation, the alien girl began showing signs that she wanted to share more about herself. She no longer looked at the world with the same cautious curiosity as when she first arrived. Now, there was a spark in her eyes, a hint of something deeper: memory, knowledge, and experience beyond anything he had seen before. He noticed subtle gestures she made, symbols she drew in the dust on the floor, and sounds that carried meaning, even though he couldn't understand them yet. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the garage was bathed in a warm orange glow, she seemed restless. She moved to the workbench and began tapping gently on the surface in rhythmic patterns. He watched her, trying to understand, feeling that this was her way of communicating something important. He realized that she wasn't just learning from him anymore. She wanted him to learn from her, to understand her world and her story. He pulled out paper and pencils, sitting beside her. He encouraged her to draw, to make symbols that represented her thoughts. At first, the drawings were strange shapes, unfamiliar and alien. But as he paid closer attention, he noticed patterns, lines that connected, circles within circles, small marks that seemed to represent movement or energy. It was a language, not of words, but of symbols, and through it she was beginning to share a part of her past. She gestured toward the ceiling, then toward the sky outside, as if showing him that she had traveled from somewhere far away. She pointed to herself, then made a small motion with her hands, like she was in a container or a small space. He realized she was telling him about the pod, about her journey to Earth. His heart ached as he imagined how lonely and frightening it must have been for her, traveling through the void of space, not knowing if she would survive or find safety. Through her gestures and drawings, he began to piece together a story. She was not from Earth, that much was clear. Her world, she indicated with large circles and symbols of people, had faced danger, something that forced her to leave. The pod she came in was not just a vehicle. It was an escape, a way to survive when everything else was at risk. He understood then that she was not just lost. She was fleeing something, running from danger, hoping to find safety on an unknown planet. He tried to comfort her. He held her hand gently, rubbed her back, and spoke softly, even though she couldn't understand his words completely. She responded with a small glow, a light that pulsed in rhythm with her breathing. It was her way of showing she trusted him, that she knew he wanted to help her. And in that moment, he felt a deep responsibility, not just to keep her alive, but to protect her from whatever dangers might follow her here. The alien girl continued to reveal more, bit by bit. She drew shapes that resembled beings like her, people from her world, as she made small sounds that seemed like names or identifiers. She gestured sadly toward some symbols that were broken or disconnected, hinting at loss, destruction, or perhaps the absence of family and friends. He could sense her grief, her fear, and the loneliness that must have accompanied her journey. It was overwhelming to think about how much she had endured before arriving in his garage. He decided that if she could share pieces of her past, he could help her feel a little safer in the present. He began creating small routines for her regular meals, a quiet place to rest, and even simple activities that mirrored the world she had left behind, at least in a tiny way. She seemed to respond positively, her glow becoming steady and calm. It was as if the small comforts of routine reassured her, helping her heal from the shock of arriving in a completely foreign world. She also showed signs of intelligence and reasoning far beyond what he had expected. She began experimenting with objects, not just exploring them, but trying to understand how they worked, why they moved the way they did, and what their purpose was. She could figure out simple mechanisms quickly, and he watched in amazement as she learned through observation and trial, adapting to new tools and tasks that were completely foreign to her. One day, she made a new sound, a tone he had not heard before, but it was different, insistent, urgent. She gestured outside the garage, pointing at the sky, and mimed flying movements. He realized she was trying to tell him about her people, about where she came from. She wanted him to understand that she was not just a visitor here, but a traveler. From a distant place, someone who had survived against all odds to reach him. He began talking to her more about Earth, trying to bridge the gap between their worlds. He showed her the sky, the trees, the animals, and even small details, like how water flowed from the tap or how light changed throughout the day. She watched everything intently, occasionally mimicking his actions, sometimes glowing faintly when she found something especially interesting or comforting. It became clear that she was trying to compare this new world with the one she had lost, trying to make sense of it in her mind. At night, she would often stare out at the stars, her eyes wide and reflective. He realized that she remembered her, home, her people, and the journey she had made. He sat beside her, not speaking, just offering presence and reassurance. Sometimes she would reach out and touch his hand lightly, a silent way of saying, "I am still here. I am still safe." Those quiet moments were the most profound. They didn't require words, only understanding, empathy, and trust. She also began showing him that she had abilities he could barely comprehend. Sometimes, when she was curious or excited, a soft glow would ripple across her skin, changing colors and patterns that seemed intentional. It wasn't just beautiful. It was communication, a way of expressing emotions when words and gestures weren't enough. He learned to read these signals slowly, associating certain glows with emotions like joy, curiosity, or caution. Through her drawings, sounds, and gestures, he realized that she had a mission, or at least a purpose. She was not just a wanderer. She had been sent somewhere for survival, and she had come here for a reason. Her intelligence, awareness, and instincts all hinted at a deeper understanding of her world, even though she was now alone on a strange planet. He couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and protectiveness. She was both fragile and incredibly capable, a combination that demanded his full attention and care. One afternoon, she began pointing to herself, then to the garage, then back to the sky, making small, deliberate sounds. He finally understood she wanted to stay with him, at least for now. She trusted him, relied on him, and recognized that he was her only connection to safety in this unfamiliar place. It was a profound moment of mutual understanding. She had survived a journey across space, and now she had chosen to rely on a human to help her navigate a world she didn't know. He realized that their bond was growing stronger every day. He wasn't just a protector. He was a teacher, a companion, and someone who had become part of her survival. And she wasn't just a mysterious being. She was intelligent, aware, and capable of teaching him things about life, patience, and understanding that he had never considered before. As night fell again, he sat beside her while she slept, glowing faintly under the dim lights. The garage had become more than a shelter. It was now a home, a place where trust, learning, and connection thrived. He knew that her past was full of unknown dangers, that her journey had been difficult, and that the future might hold more challenges. But he also knew that together they could face whatever came next. Her pod remained on the workbench, a quiet reminder of her incredible journey and the world she had left behind. But now she was no longer just an object of wonder or a mystery to be solved. She was alive, aware, and beginning to share her story. And he realized that this was only the beginning. There was still so much to learn, so much to understand about her world, her abilities, and the purpose that had brought her to Earth. He felt a quiet determination settle in his heart. He would help her, protect her, and learn from her, no matter what challenges lay ahead. She had survived so much already, and now she had him. That trust, fragile and precious, was a gift he could never take for granted, and as he looked at her sleeping, a soft glow surrounding her small form, he knew one thing clearly. Their story was just beginning, and it would be extraordinary in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The days that followed felt heavier, as if the world outside was slowly starting to creep into the safety of the garage. He had gotten used to the quiet rhythm of life with the alien girl, the simple routines that made her feel secure, and the moments of learning that bound them together. But now something had changed. The air outside carried a tension he couldn't ignore, a faint hum of unease that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It started subtly at first. Strange lights flickered over the trees at night, tiny movements in the distance that seemed deliberate. Shadows of unknown shapes appeared near the edge of the yard, moving too fast to be animals, too silent to be human. He tried to ignore them at first, convincing himself that it was his imagination, that the quiet nights were playing tricks on him. But the alien girl didn't ignore them. She reacted instantly, her glowing eyes widening, her small body tensing, as if she could sense the approach of something unfamiliar. He realized quickly that she could sense danger long before he could. When a car drove past on the distant road, he barely noticed it, but she flinched, her small hand gripping his arm. That's when he understood. She wasn't just learning from him. She had instincts, senses, and abilities that went far beyond any human capability. And whatever was approaching wasn't normal. Determined to protect her, he began preparing. He moved the pod to a more secure part of the garage, covered the windows, and barricaded entrances with whatever he could find. Every small action was careful, deliberate, a way to make sure she would remain safe. She watched him as he worked, tilting her head, her glowing skin flickering softly. It was clear that she understood the danger, even if she couldn't speak about it in words. Then, the first real test came. One night, he heard a faint hum outside, unlike any sound he had ever heard. It was mechanical, almost alive, moving through the air with precision. He froze, realizing instantly that someone or something was searching for her. The alien girl stiffened beside him, her small hand resting on his chest, sending a faint pulse of light through her skin. He could feel the urgency, the warning in her touch. She knew what was coming, and he knew he had to act fast. Without hesitation, he guided her to a hidden compartment behind the workbench. She moved quickly, intuitively, understanding exactly where to go. He followed, placing his hand over hers, reassuring her silently that they would get through this together. The hum grew louder, closer, and shadows stretched across the garage walls. The tension was suffocating, the air thick with anticipation. Then it happened. A small drone-like object hovered near the garage window, scanning, searching. He held his breath, unsure if it could see the alien girl, unsure of what would happen next. But she reacted in a way that stunned him. Her skin began to glow brightly, a soft yet powerful light that pulsed in rhythm with her heart. The drone wavered, hesitated, and then retreated slightly. He realized then that her glow wasn't just beautiful, it was defensive. She could protect herself in ways he couldn't fully understand, and he felt a mix of relief and awe. After the drone disappeared, she calmed down, curling slightly beside him. Her glow dimmed, returning to a soft, gentle pulse. He rubbed her back gently, whispering soothing words, even though she didn't understand the language. She responded with a small musical sound, her way of expressing relief and gratitude. It was then he understood just how extraordinary she really was. She had survived the journey to Earth, adapted to a completely new world, and now she had the ability to defend herself when danger came close. The next few days were tense, strange. Sightings continued, lights in the sky, distant hums, shadows that moved unnaturally. He knew that whatever was searching for her was persistent, determined, and likely not human. He realized he needed to plan further, not just for the garage, but for her overall safety. Every day became a delicate balance of routine and vigilance. Teaching her, learning from her, and preparing for whatever might arrive next. Despite the tension, she also showed him remarkable resilience. Even in moments of fear, she retained her curiosity. She would explore small areas of the garage, test new objects, and respond to his guidance with increasing understanding. He noticed subtle changes in her behavior, confidence in her movements, awareness of her surroundings, and the beginnings of problem-solving when faced with new obstacles. She was learning, adapting, and growing stronger by the day. One afternoon, she demonstrated something that left him speechless. A small container of water tipped over, spilling across the floor. Before he could react, she touched it with her fingers, and the water seemed to respond to her touch, forming shapes that shimmered faintly in the light. It was subtle, but it was undeniably controlled. She looked at him, her eyes bright, and made a soft, melodic sound. He realized she could manipulate elements in ways humans couldn't, adding a new layer to her abilities and their survival strategy. He began to consider the bigger picture. Whoever or whatever had sent the drone was likely not the only threat. They might be tracking her, monitoring the planet, or even sending more machines to retrieve her. The gravity of her situation became clear. She was alone in a foreign world, and her survival depended entirely on their careful actions. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also a fierce determination to keep her safe. Their bond deepened through these challenges. She began to respond to his voice more consistently, understanding his tone, expressions, and intentions. He realized that communication didn't always require words. Gestures, glances, and shared experiences were enough to form a profound connection. She learned from him, and he learned from her. Together, they navigated fear, curiosity, and the constant unknown, forming a partnership that was both practical and emotional. One night, after another sighting of strange lights outside, he sat beside her while she glowed softly, watching him intently. He spoke quietly, explaining things he didn't know if she would understand, but hoping that the emotion and tone would convey the message. She responded with subtle gestures, touching his arm, leaning slightly into him, and emitting small pulses of light. In those quiet moments, he realized that she trusted him completely. He had become her anchor in an unfamiliar, dangerous world. He also started preparing for more proactive measures. He made plans to move her to a safer location if necessary, identifying possible hideouts, safe routes, and places where she could stay without drawing attention. She watched him, mimicking some actions, learning strategies, and understanding the need for caution. It was clear that she wasn't just relying on him blindly. She was actively participating in her own protection. Through all this, he never let her fear dominate her. He continued teaching her about Earth, letting her experience small joys like the feel of wind on her face, the scent of flowers, and the warmth of sunlight. Each of these moments helped her adapt, gave her strength, and reminded both of them why it was worth facing the dangers outside. The world could be threatening, but it could also be beautiful, and he wanted her to see that, even in the middle of uncertainty. As the night fell, they sat together, the garage bathed in her soft glow. He reflected on how much had changed since she arrived. What had started as a strange encounter with a glowing pod had grown into a partnership, a bond of trust, and a shared journey of survival and understanding. He knew more challenges were coming, but he also knew that together they could face them. And in that quiet, glowing space, he felt a profound truth settle in his heart. She wasn't just an alien to be protected. She was a companion, an intelligent being capable of teaching him about life, resilience, and connection. She had faced unimaginable danger to get here, and now, together, they were stronger, ready for whatever would come next. The days ahead would bring more tests, but for the first time, he felt confident. He wasn't alone in keeping her safe, and she wasn't alone in navigating this strange, unpredictable world. They had each other, and that bond was stronger than any threat outside the garage walls. Days passed with the quiet tension still lingering, but now there was a new feeling in the air, a sense of anticipation, as if something big was about to happen. He had grown used to the rhythm of life with the alien girl, the way she moved, learned, and communicated with him. But deep down, he knew her past wasn't finished catching up to her. Her people or whoever had sent the drones were out there, searching, tracking. And now the moment of truth was approaching. It happened on a night when the stars were particularly bright, scattered across the sky like countless diamonds. The alien girl had been quiet, sitting on the blanket, watching the faint glow of the garage lights. Suddenly, a soft hum rose outside, different from the drones, more precise and controlled, almost gentle, but unmistakably purposeful. She stiffened immediately, her glowing eyes narrowing, her body pulsing with tension. She was aware of him before he even saw anything. Moments later, a shimmering light appeared in the yard, and he realized, with a mix of awe and fear, that they had arrived. Figures, unlike anything human, descended gracefully, moving with a fluidity that was almost magical. The alien girl rose slowly, stepping toward them instinctively, yet hesitating as she reached out with her hands. He could see the recognition in her eyes. These were her people. Somehow she knew them, even though they had been separated by unimaginable distances. The figures approached, moving slowly and deliberately. They were beautiful, graceful, and seemed to radiate a quiet authority. He realized that she was not alone by nature. She came from a civilization far more advanced and aware than he had ever imagined. And now, after everything she had endured, she was about to be reunited with them. He felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, curiosity, and a deep sense of wonder. She had survived incredible odds to reach Earth, and now her journey was coming full circle. But there was also uncertainty. He didn't know how they would react to him, a human who had been her protector, teacher, and companion for weeks. Would they trust him? Would they take her away without understanding the bond they had formed? The alien girl stepped forward, her small hand glowing faintly. One of the figures extended a hand toward her, and she responded immediately, their fingers touching lightly, a gentle connection that seemed almost sacred. She turned to look at him briefly, and in that glance, he understood. She wanted him to be acknowledged, to be recognized as someone who had protected her, helped her survive, and shared her journey. Her people seemed to understand, their glowing eyes softening as they looked at him. Communication began in a way he could barely comprehend. They spoke in melodic tones, soft sounds that resonated with her and, strangely, with him. He couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. They were grateful, curious, and cautious all at once. Through gestures, glances, and subtle pulses of light from their bodies, he understood that they had been searching for her for a long time and that she was now safe. The alien girl moved closer to him, her small hand resting briefly on his arm. She glowed softly, almost like a thank you, a message of appreciation that transcended words. He felt a warmth in his chest, a deep satisfaction that he had done the right thing, even when the days of fear, vigilance, and learning had been exhausting. He had protected her, and now he was witnessing the reward, not for himself, but for her survival and reunion. Her people studied him closely, their attention both curious and approving. They seemed to understand the connection he had formed with her, recognizing that he had played a vital role in her adaptation and safety. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, a nod, a wave of light that conveyed acknowledgement. He felt a sense of belonging in that moment, not as one of them, but as someone who had been part of an extraordinary story, someone who had helped change the course of her journey. The reunion was gentle but profound. She moved fluidly between him and her people, showing gestures, soft sounds, and glows that expressed emotions words could never capture. He watched, amazed, as she communicated memories of her past, stories of her journey, and experiences of the strange world she had found on Earth. Her people responded with empathy, curiosity, and care, clearly understanding the depth of what she had endured. As the night wore on, he realized that this meeting was not just about reunion, but about understanding. Her people were learning about Earth through her experiences, seeing the beauty, danger, and unexpected kindness in this strange new world. And he realized that he, too, was learning from them about resilience, intelligence, and the ways beings from different worlds could connect, communicate, and care for each other. He spent hours with them, learning their ways, observing their movements, and trying to understand the subtle patterns of their communication. The alien girl remained close to him, glowing softly, as if bridging the gap between the two worlds. She had survived, adapted, and thrived in a place she had never known. But now she was part of something larger, a family, a civilization, and a future that was brighter than he could have imagined. Eventually, it was time for her to leave with her people. He felt a pang of sadness, knowing that their daily life together would end, but it was tempered by pride and relief. She had learned, grown, and survived, and now she was returning to her world, a place where she belonged. She reached out to him one last time, her glow pulsing gently, and he placed his hand over hers. The connection was silent, yet it carried everything they had shared, the trust, the bond, and the unspoken promise that she would never forget him. Her people extended their hands toward him as well, offering gestures of farewell, respect, and acknowledgement. It was a moment of closure, a final recognition of his role in her journey. He understood that their world was far beyond his understanding, but he also realized that he had become part of it, even briefly, in a way that would stay with him forever. As the alien girl moved toward them, rising into the sky, she looked back one final time. Her eyes met his, and he felt a wave of emotion, gratitude, trust, and the quiet joy of having been part of something extraordinary. And then, in a blink, she was gone, leaving behind a faint glow in the sky, a memory that would linger in his mind forever. He stood alone in the garage, the night quiet once again, but the air felt different, now charged with wonder, possibility, and the knowledge that the universe was far bigger and stranger than he had ever imagined. The pod sat quietly on the workbench, now empty but still glowing faintly, a reminder of the journey that had begun with a single falling object from the sky. He realized that life had changed completely. The world outside was the same, but his understanding of it, of connection, and of courage had grown immensely. He had learned to care for something truly extraordinary, to understand another being without words, and to face challenges that were beyond anything he could have anticipated. And in the quiet that followed, he smiled, knowing that their story wasn't just hers, it was theirs, and it had transformed him in ways he would carry forever. The alien girl was safe, reunited with her people, and thriving. And he, a simple human who had once only watched the stars, had become part of a story of survival, trust, and the incredible bond between worlds. Even after she left, the lessons remained. Courage, empathy, and the power of connection could bridge even the most unimaginable divides. And as he looked up at the stars, he felt hope, knowing that somewhere out there, she was looking at the same sky, remembering him, and glowing with the same light that had lit up his world for so many unforgettable days.